So, as always in these situations, Ian Dunt, probably, I'd say, one of the top journalists when it comes to reporting, certainly about Brexit. If you want to know probably what's going on with Brexit, I'd probably go to Ian Dunt, look up his latest article. He will probably give you the best, accurate, up-to-date information of what the hell is going on in this situation. And at this point, I always recommend his book. Where is it? I'll find it. But yeah, I always recommend his book. Brexit, What the Hell Happens Now? It's very good. Go and buy it. So, today's story from politics.co.uk as always. Well, we've run out of time. And this shouldn't be surprising to anyone that's been following this channel since the beginning. You may remember we told you there is a deadline on when all this needs to be done. We've now passed that deadline. So it doesn't matter. It's going to be a no-deal Brexit. So today's National Audit Office, the NAO, reported a no-deal preparations reads like a horror story. It shows that we are now past the point of no return. No-deal preparations. No matter what we do now, it is too late. We can't get the border systems online in time. That puts us completely at the mercy of our negotiating partner. Reading the report is like watching the 18-rated version of a movie in which the government has tried to bring out as a 12A. Which with its impact statements over the summer, the delays in negotiations and the ongoing uncertainty about whether we'd be able to agree on a deal at all have meant that the government departments, including the Border Force, HMRC, DEFRA and the Department of Transport, have been unable to plan because they don't know what they're planning for or when it'll happen. The Border Delivery Group set up a cabinet office to coordinate the work, and is understandably focused on what needs to be in place on day one of a no deal, but quickly found itself swamped by the speed of events. Startingly, it has only just started preparing for what would happen on the Irish border. Even out of the 12 major projects to replicate or adapt existing border systems to be ready for day one and now at risk of not even being delivered on time. With the cascade of failure is because so many of the systems are reliant on other ones. At the heart of this is the new Customs Declaration System, a massive nationwide IT project which had its goal and a timetable adapted to conditions which should sound the alarm bells for anyone familiar with this kind of government program. It currently has an amber warning in Whitehall. When one problem emerges, it quickly spreads, like a pandemic, for instance. The uncertainty in negotiating outcomes means that departments have been unable to provide detailed information for the compliance regime on what they are expected to enforce, which means the Border Force is uncertain how many staff it needs, which leads to failure in recruitment and training. It is currently planning to recruit an additional 581 members of staff, but thinks that the eventual number could be as high as 2,000. They won't be able to deploy by March of next year, so a readiness task force of 300 is being set up instead as some kind of emergency triage. As for infrastructure, it is simply too late. HMRC will not be able to track goods, and Border Force will not have the space or facilities to examine them. Ports are not going to start pouring millions into building infrastructure because they have no idea if it will ever be needed. Other businesses will need to be ready too if disaster is to be averted. By the time that has passed for that too, HMRC estimates that between 145,000 to 255,000 traders who have never done so before would need to fill out customs declarations, and they'll be inevitably make mistakes or simply not do it. That'll create bottlenecks immediately. But the government's own papers from this summer confirmed that it was already too late to train traders to do this. There are no plans on what to do at the Irish border. There is no design or implementation programme for a roll-on, roll-off ferry port or the Eurotunnel. All we really know is that the government will claim on day one of a no deal that the risk assessment for goods coming in from Europe has not changed, and that fully agricultural or security checks are therefore not necessary. But this is a short-term fix, if indeed it is a fix at all. Organised criminals and others are likely to be quickly to exploit the perceived weaknesses or gaps in the enforcement regime, the NAO warns. This combined with the UK's potential loss of access to EU security, law enforcement and criminal justice tools could create security weaknesses which the government would need to address urgently. And this is where things start to go dangerously wrong. There'd be a blockade of trade with Europe due to no deal, and the instant tailbacks at the border. We'd throw open our borders in an act of desperation, and then other non-EU countries would close their borders to us because they know that we were open to any kind of terrorist or black market activity or contaminated product. We'd be turning ourselves into a pariah state. Government departments have begun civil contingency planning. The report says blatantly, plans are in progress to cope with issues such as queues in traffic in Kent, and to enable the continued supplies of essential goods and medicines. The idea that a successful country would put itself in this kind of position is incomprehensible, even at this late stage. But what is truly shocking, whatever else you might think of rights or wrongs of Brexit, is that Article 50 was triggered without having come up with a formal deliverable plan for what would happen when it reached its default outcome, which is a no deal. We know at the start how this mechanism operated. The pitiless 2 years play out and they eject you, no matter what has happened or hasn't been agreed. To activate it in a drunken haze of reactionary self-congratulation, even without knowing what you would do, is an unquestionable act of national irresponsibility, and to have then wasted time on a general election and an internal party squabbling of doing something about it is even worse. It is simply unforgivable. And that's where we are. We are in an absolute nightmare scenario, and this worries me to no end. Especially the fact that, remember, we have no agreement with anyone. There will be massive tailbacks. This will lead to shortages. So, if you are in the UK, here's something I recommend you do to prepare just in case this goes all tits up. And with this government, we all know that's the direction it's probably going to go. So my recommendation to you is I'd go out and start stockpiling food for yourself, because, ladies and gentlemen, this looks like it might get far worse before it gets to be, shall we say, slightly worse. Because that's the situation where we're going to go. We're going to go from absolutely god-awful to slightly worse. And this entire Brexit project, as I've said time and time again on this channel, will prove nothing more than Britain already had the best option it had, which was being a member of the EU. And that's where we are. So, yeah, and remember this. This isn't caused by Remainers. Even though they like to blame us for not getting behind Brexit, the real problem, always has and always will be, the Brexiteers who pushed this on. The Brexiteers who cheered this on like there was nothing wrong. They are uniquely to blame for the situation this country is in. No one else is to blame but them.